The signal reached Earth at 0347 hours, Greenwich Standard Time. It was not a distress call. It was not a warning. It was a broadcast, cold, clinical, and deliberate, transmitted across every open frequency in the known galaxy. The Vorkai Dominion had not hidden what they did to the Alari. They had announced it. Admiral Ethan Cross was standing in the war room of the UES Unrelenting, his coffee untouched, his jaw locked so tight his teeth ached. Around him, officers stared at their screens in silence. The holographic display at the center of the room showed what remained of Alara Prime, a scorched orbital shell, glassy and dead, rotating in the pale light of a dying star. 11 billion people. Gone in 72 hours. Cross had met the Alari once, at a diplomatic summit on Proxima Station. They were small beings, lavender-skinned, enormous amber eyes, voices like wind chimes. They made music out of mathematics. Their children had presented Earth's delegation with hand-woven star charts as gifts. He looked at the ash cloud where their world used to be. "Get me a line to the Galactic Council," he said quietly. Now. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council occupied a ring station the size of a small moon, orbiting the neutral star Varith. 23 species sent representatives there. It was, in theory, the governing body of civilized space. High Chancellor Zyrex Thorne was already speaking when Cross's transmission connected. Thorne was Delvari, tall, gray-skinned, seven-fingered, with the kind of calm that came from 700 years of political survival. He stood at the central podium, his robes immaculate, his tone measured. "The Council acknowledges the tragedy of Alara Prime," Thorne was saying. "However, the Vorkai Dominion's actions, while regrettable, fall within contested sovereign jurisdiction. The Council's mandate does not extend to Chancellor Thorne." Cross's voice cut through the chamber feed like a blade through silk. Every head turned. Every camera pivoted. Admiral Cross. Thorne's expression remained unreadable. "Earth's fleet has not been recognized to speak at this session." "I'm not asking to speak," Cross said. "I'm notifying you." A pause. "Notifying us of what, precisely?" Cross looked directly into the camera. His eyes were the color of a storm front, gray-green, flat, utterly without theater. 48 hours ago, Earth's Joint Command voted unanimously to invoke the Dresden Clause. He let that land. Several delegates shifted in their seats. Humanity is formally designating the Vorkai Dominion a genocidal entity under the Terran Articles of War. As of this moment, we are no longer bound by Galactic Council jurisdiction in matters pertaining to Vorkai military engagement. The chamber erupted. Thorne raised his hand for order, but his composure had cracked, barely, at the corners. "Admiral, the Dresden Clause is a unilateral human legal instrument. It holds no weight in this body. Earth's fleet numbers what, 400 warships? The Vorkai command over 4,000. 412, Cross corrected. We counted this morning." "Then you are committing suicide." Cross almost smiled. It did not reach his eyes. "Chancellor," he said, "with respect, you've known us for 60 years. In that time, you've watched us cure 3 plagues, terraform 2 moons, and end a civil war that killed 40 million of our own people in under a decade." He paused. "You still don't understand what we are." "And what are you?" Thorne asked. The question was not entirely rhetorical. "We're the species," Cross said quietly, "that invented the Geneva Convention after we invented mustard gas. We built rules for war because we knew what we were capable of without them." His voice dropped lower. "The Vorkai just reminded us what happens when someone else doesn't have those rules." He reached forward and cut the signal. What followed, the historians would later call the 40-day campaign. Military analysts across 12 species would spend decades studying it. The Vorkai had numbers. They had range. They had a century of conquest behind them. What they did not have was any frame of reference for what humanity did next. Earth did not send its fleet in a single wave. It sent it in sequence, rotating strike groups running continuous operations on a schedule so relentless that Vorkai repair crews couldn't finish patching hull breaches before the next wave hit. Human pilots slept in shifts of 4 hours. They ate at their stations. The fleet's medical staff treated exhaustion as a tactical variable and managed it accordingly. The Vorkai had expected a battle. They received an attrition engine. Human EW teams cracked Vorkai communication encryption in 11 days, 3 days faster than their own projection. Drone swarms, built from repurposed mining platforms, filled Vorkai sensor arrays with ghost signals until their targeting systems simply stopped trusting themselves. And then there were the Marines. The Vorkai had heard that humans fought in close quarters. They had not understood what that meant until fire teams breached the flagship Eternal Dominion through 3 simultaneously blown airlocks. The ship's internal security, designed to repel Delvari boarders, Keth raiders, Soul infiltrators, was not designed for creatures that used their own pain as information and kept moving anyway. The battle for the Eternal Dominion's command deck lasted 19 minutes. Sergeant Yolanda Ferreira, who would later require reconstruction of her left shoulder and 2 ribs, planted the UES standard next to the Vorkai High Marshal's command throne and then sat down on the floor because her legs, finally, had decided they were done. "Breach secure," she said into her calm, breathing hard. "You can come get the big chair now, Admiral." Cross stood before the Galactic Council for the second time 39 days after the first. He looked older. Not in the way that fear aged beings, in the way that certainty did. He placed a data core on the podium. Vorkai Dominion military command structure, dissolved. Their fleet, interned at Terran holding coordinates, pending war crimes tribunal. Ilari survivors, 17,000, living in refugee stations, have been offered resettlement under Earth's protection. The chamber was so quiet you could hear the ventilation system. High Chancellor Zyrex Thorne stared at him for a long moment. "You actually did it," he said. It was not quite a sentence. It was more like a man recalibrating something fundamental. "We did what we said we'd do," Cross replied. 400 ships against 4,000. 412. Thorne looked down at the data core. Then back up. "What do you want, Admiral? Formal recognition? A seat on the Security Council? Trade concessions?" Cross shook his head slowly. "We want a genocide tribunal," he said. "A real one. With teeth. Binding on every species in this chamber, including ours." He looked around the room, at the Delvari, the Keth, the tall silken soul, the dozens of species that had watched 11 billion Ilari die and decided it was a jurisdictional question. "We want to make sure that the next time someone reaches for an extinction switch, there is a consequence waiting for them that they cannot calculate their way around." A long silence. "And if the council refuses?" Thorne asked. Cross picked up the data core and turned toward the exit. "Then you'll have to explain to the next 11 billion people why you didn't." He walked out. Behind him, the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council, for the first time in its 400-year history, sat in total, unbroken silence. Because every species in that room had just watched 400 ships dismantle an empire. And every one of them was now doing the same quiet calculation. If that's what they do when they're angry, what are they like when they're afraid? They had no answer. That, more than anything else, was the thing that kept High Chancellor Zyrex Thorne awake that night, the slow, dawning understanding that humanity had not fought the Vorkai because it thought it could win. It had fought because it had decided, somewhere in the brutal centuries of its own history, that there were things worth dying for. And somehow, impossibly, infuriatingly, magnificently, that turned out to matter more than the numbers. In the Ilari refugee records, the resettlement coordinator noted that the first human relief ship to arrive carried, among medical supplies and food rations, 17 crates of musical instruments. No one had requested them. The humans had just figured they'd be needed.